Good evening, this is Goldie. It's June 2nd, 2010. I'm going to be talking today about the message of outrage on Fox News about the worst environmental disaster in our lifetime, besides the Valdez and maybe Chernobyl. Yesterday, I had Fox on. Too much time on my hands, as they say. And one of the things that O'Reilly did was he had John Stossel on. John Stossel used to be on ABC in New York in the early days. I don't know what he was on at this interview, but he was on something, John Stossel. The entire day and up through this particular telecast by O'Reilly, they were crying all day long. They were yelling almost. Bret Baier was yelling. Hannity is yelling. He can't believe it. I did not listen to Rush yesterday. But I was listening for the message of what's going on with the oil spill. And it's hard to figure out what that message is, because you hear them they've gone from drill baby drill, which Obama very smartly was able to nip in the bud by opening up offshore lands to new drilling, some, and then he got hit with this, and luck is just how it works sometimes. But starting drill baby drill was a huge campaign issue and chant that occurred in the 2008 presidential election, certainly Sarah Palin. And confusion has arisen on the right, and I'm going to call them the right. I'll call it Republicans, and Republicans that are trying to get elected in 2010 and 2012. And so looking at the message of what they're doing here is the outrage is the same outrage that everybody has when they see the turtles with oil on them, the birds with oil on them, the beaches with oil on them, and the marshlands with oil on them. And this outrage is being turned into an outrage over the failure of Obama to get down there and, I guess, put buckets out there and pick up the oil himself. Is a failure of the federal government to come to the aid of these particular states. And they're just really good at getting this message out. So in comparison to the healthcare situation where the federal government was doing too much, in this situation, this is where we need the federal government in there. And amazingly, O'Reilly and I agreed that, and he was stating this to John Stossel, who was the sitting libertarian. And John, I don't know what was wrong with him, seriously, last night. He was just kind of wobbling around. But O'Reilly actually said, shouldn't the government be allowed and required, on behalf of us, the taxpayers, to regulate, inspect, and make the oil companies comply, or any other potentially dangerous corporation comply with regulations that could prevent this kind of disaster? So then he asks John Stossel, what do you think, John? You're a libertarian. And John Stossel states that the federal government can't do anything right. So this reminds me of Hannity and Combs, where they have Combs on there, and Combs, God bless him, he really does speak well and does not like these guys. But Stossel, I don't know what he was saying. I mean, this is the absolute classic example of a commons. A commons is something that is not owned by any individual, but is owned by the community. And the only way to protect this commons is by having an overarching government, that regulates and inspects. We know, and these corporations that are specifically doing the drilling, their best interest is to save as much money as possible. That's what we want them to do. We want them to make as much profits as possible. That's quite obvious. That's the only way that I'm even able to do this broadcast, or you're able to listen to it, or buy the computer to listen to it. but it's quite clear that regulations are needed for certain commons: air, water, land. Fox has a great opportunity right now to talk about the minimum levels of regulation that are needed. Because we know as regulation increases, bureaucracies build on their own, bureaucracies feed upon themselves, and their own self-interest is to make themselves bigger, whether it's EPA, TCEQ in Texas, or whatever the state agencies are in the other affected states. So there's always that problem back and forth between the corporations wanting to make their most money and us as people wanting to protect this commons through our government. Now, the government could allow them to self-regulate, and they pretty much do. The regulations are generally written by lobbyists, handed through the legislators, because they always suggest a piece of legislation to the legislator. You hand it to them. And they'll hand it to their aides and go, how does this look? If nobody objects, which usually they don't till the emergency happens, that's what you get. So actually right now, the responsibility for this cleanup, it's actually, and should be rightly so, on the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the person who is responsible for this. The taxpayer was unwilling to pay higher taxes on the use of gasoline in order to pay for naval ships that could suck up this amount of oil, or build booms, or build islands, barriers around the barrier islands. We've been subsidized all these years by not having any contingency plan for this particular type of emergency. That's the price you pay for paying $3 a gallon. Europe pays 2 to 3 times as much. That's what we get. We get cheap gas, and we get a completely fouled Gulf of Mexico. That's the way it goes. Everybody wants it cheap. The fact is, when you're dealing with a commons, whether it's fresh water or salt water or air or land, you need to look at what the ultimate cost is. And if you want to get as much oil as you can out of drill baby drill on the coastlines, and you don't want to pay to have naval ships ready, or pay to have oil company ships ready, or force the oil companies, the drillers, to have ships ready to clean up when this happens again, then that's fine. Just make that decision. That decision's already been made. And it's painful. It's painful to see. The American public shouldn't act surprised. If you're uneducated, you can act surprised. If you have any education at all, don't act surprised. And don't think that BP is going to clean this up, or that this is going to prevent when it happens the next time. Just imagine a Chernobyl. And imagine what our nuclear power plants look like as far as technological advancements needed to keep that safe and clean. What happens if you get an earthquake through one of those things? Then you're going to be yelling at your federal government. Why didn't you worry about this? Why didn't you regulate more? At least that's what you might hear out of whoever's out of power and trying to get elected in the fall. Bobby Jindal, hearing him crying, "Help me, help me, help me." It's a great message. These guys are actually turning this message of crying and this pain that everybody is feeling who watches it into, this is going to be a failure of regulation. And so therefore, we should have less regulation. It's going to be great to see how that gets steered. Of course, it starts out as a failure of the Obama administration. Let's throw the Democrats out. That's what you're going to see this fall. But generally speaking, the people that are paying the money to have these words spoken want less regulation. They always do. So right now it's fun, quite fun to watch Fox and watch these guys go through their machinations of how this is the worst thing that ever happened and it's Obama's fault. It's great. It's great to hear these guys do this. Drill, baby, drill. Excellent, excellent. So I had a friend of mine talked to earlier today, and we were talking about my prior immigration rant, and he was all for the Arizona law, and I was like, Richard, what are you watching? It was Fox. Oh, and I watch everything. Yet he came down on the Fox side. So when you have fair and balanced in your name, it allows you as a watcher, if that's the sole thing you watch, which generally it is because the other stations make those watchers sick. Similarly, Jon Stewart watchers just cannot, or I assume Olbermann and Rachel Maddow watchers cannot watch Fox. I understand it. But he says he watches everything and actually only watches Fox. So when you hear I watch everything, it means you don't. Yesterday, moving on again, reiterating what's going on with that immigration situation in Arizona and my feeling that it's just immoral and unconstitutional, and that just writing into it that there shall not be racial profiling in that law, all that does is allow white people to say that that's okay. People of color, you're not hearing it from them. But they did find a couple that apparently spoke up at an LA County boycott meeting, and I guess it was a commissioner's court, and they had a grandson, I believe, was killed. It's all over Fox today. Grandson was killed by an illegal immigrant who was just let out of jail or something like that, but it was a black couple that was saying, I wish we had this law in California. And that's kind of the best that Fox has been able to do, to find someone of color to say that this is okay. As I spoke to my friend, I'm of the opinion, I just don't ever want people ever singled out in this country for anything because of their color. That's just, I don't want to have that kind of country. That is not the kind of country I want to live in. I know that we might end up being safer, and I know we have a big problem with immigration and uncontrolled usage of resources in this country, or commons. But you can't allow your feelings of impotence at the problem to be mixed up with saying, okay, well then we'll put up with a little bit of racial profiling. This is how the Patriot Act got passed. We don't want that kind of country. When I was in law school, it took a long time to figure out, and I've talked about this on racial profiling, people that comment that they don't like it, it took us a long time to even figure out exactly what it is. What's the actual police power? What's the prohibited action that's happening? It pains me. I'm pained at hearing somebody who's white saying racial profiling is okay. So those of you, my friends, anybody that's watching, that argument, it causes pain to see you come up with that. I understand we have a problem. I understand we need to seal the border. I understand we can't send back 12 million people, because how do you find them? It can't be done. But we know we have those problems. So for the 12 million that are here or whatever, we're going to have the path to citizenship. We're going to have to do something about sealing up the border. That's true. I agree with it. But don't let it get mixed up with racial profiling. That's not the kind of country we want to have. It's too important. It's way too important. I understand we're bleeding cash. Healthcare plan is going to make the government bleed more cash. I think overall we'll all spend less. I want to talk about something else. Something else that gets mixed up in the immigration debate is the drug war. And you'll hear it over and over again, mixed in. Drug violence, immigration, smuggling, screaming, Tea Party screaming, Fox screaming. Actually, a lot of people are screaming. We've spent $1 trillion in 40 years. I'm reading an article from May 14th, 2010. It was in the Austin American Statesman. It talks about hundreds of thousands of lives have been lost. That's totally true. You always have to remember who's putting forth the message when you see the message. So when we see April 29th, 2010 article, John Cornyn, who's a senator in Texas, wanting $300 million for border enforcement, that money is going to contractors. It's going to defense contractors. It's going to other types of contractors, fence builders. Private contractors, private security contractors. They push for that. You always have to figure out who's pushing forth the message, who's paying the money, who's making the money. For the drug war, my argument has always been, it's the drug companies. I could easily get on Paxil or Oxy or Xanax. I could go to my doctor and feign those particular items. You know, I'm tired, I'm depressed, I have anxieties, I have pain, my back hurts. Be a $25 copay, or if they're generic, $15 copay. I can get on those drugs so easily. Anybody in America who's on a drug plan, who's on a medical plan can. And now even more will be able to. But that drug war, that really is the drug companies versus marijuana and other illegal drugs for which they can make no money. That's the real drug war. I was on a trip a couple of years ago, and there were a bunch of mid-20-somethings there, 8 of them. 6 of them had been in rehab for Oxy. That's unbelievable to me. 6 of the 8. Mid-20s, Oxy? Isn't that like a pill form of heroin? I mean, I believe that's what it is. It's a painkiller. Rush Limbaugh was addicted to it, or is, or was, I guess. So you've got to follow the money. That's the real drug war. If I were a taxpayer, which I am, I would be outraged at who knows how much money is going to be spent fighting California's legalization of marijuana effort. Federal drug funds by the DEA, Obama's DEA. More of the same. Senators take money. I don't know if he's taking money from drug companies. Representatives take money. Presidential candidates, I guess they get individual money. You know, there's individual limits. Although now corporations are going to be able to soft spend. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And when you hear about drug violence, just think back into the 20s. There's old movies about that, with alcohol. I mean, when was the last time you heard that there was a fight among distributors where somebody was killed because they're trying to supply an H-E-B with Budweiser? It's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. Well, that's what's happening. I mean, it's legal in Amsterdam, in certain places, Switzerland. They all had surges following the legalization efforts, and then it drops back off. I mean, a lot of kids do this stuff because it's illegal. Certainly for a fraction of the cost, we could take care of the few marijuana addicts that need help and need to go through rehab in comparison to the oxy addicts that have to be put in treatment for weeks, I guess. I don't know. Xanax, Vicodin. If what I saw in House is true, the withdrawal from Vicodin is a killer. It's painful. But the real message is, this is a drug war that's funded by the drug companies. And if you're soft on it, you're soft on security, or you're soft on securing the borders. No, that's totally separate. That's totally separate. Why don't we just eliminate border crossings of drugs by making it legal? Takes care of a third of the problem. Who knows what percentage of the number of people that are coming across are related to the drug trade? Some of it, that's true. There's drugs that come up through Mexico. I don't know about Canada. This one seems like a real simple one to me. But just please watch California and watch the federal money being spent to oppose it, like was done in Nevada, like was done in Colorado. Here's a story from April 13th, 2010, Austin American-Statesman. The mayor from Juarez, local gangs behind Juarez crime. They connect it with gang members from the same gang up here in Austin. Fear-mongering. Fear, fear, fear. Legalize it, my God. Here's one from April 14th, 2010, Austin American-Statesman. Mexico's death toll for war on drugs, 22,700 in 3 years. This is since a U.S.-backed military crackdown on cartels began more than 3 years ago. So that meant that was through a year and 2 months of the Obama administration. More of the same. It's embarrassing. Democrats should be embarrassed. My God, you'd eliminate all of that. You want to help this country of Mexico. Here was a huge one. This was on April 11th, 2010. So they were really doing it there in April. Officials, Austin a hub for 3 cartels. Recent cases bolster theory that area plays key role in drug trafficking. Then they show a map, because most people don't read. And you see this map, and drugs come up through Juarez to El Paso, but then there's an arrow that heads over to Austin from there. Nuevo Laredo, Austin. McAllen, Matamoros, Austin, and then on up. So maybe we can get some more money for enforcement of something that shouldn't even be enforced. Just get a prescription. March 10th, 2010, Austin American-Statesman. As Mexico drug violence surges, entrepreneurs find way to Texas. Now they're saying at least the good part of it is we're getting all these businessmen coming up because they can't hang out down there. Well, that's not what we want. Certainly one of the ways to help not solve the immigration problem, but lessen the numbers that are coming up here would certainly be to help the entrepreneurs that are down there stay down there and hire people in Mexico so they don't come to the United States. Here's a letter to the editor in the Chronicle, Austin Chronicle, January 8th, 2010. They talk about it. In 2008, there were 847,863 marijuana arrests in the U.S., almost 90% for simple possession. We do not have the money to be arresting people. Now, obviously, if somebody's smoking in their car or is intoxicated and driving, absolutely. But we don't have the money anymore to be doing stupid things, to be spending money on stupid things. We've got to clean up the Gulf. because we saved all that money on low-priced gas over the years. Here was something in December 28th, 2009, which was labeling Juarez strategy a failure, Mexico reassesses. So they obviously reassessed. This is an earlier one, and they're continuing on with their contractors and drones and cocaine, crop dusters, Dodge, trees, and bullets. Pilots from U.S. target drug plants in Colombian fields, December 22nd, 2009. The guys that sell the defoliant. You gotta love it. This was even earlier. This was June of last year, June 6, 2009. Obama anti-drug plan to target smugglers, reduce U.S. demand. That's not a fake Glenn Beck laugh. This is who you elected. More of the same. Probably since 1976, starting with Jimmy Carter. Just Say No, 1980, Ronald Reagan. 88, George H.W. Bush, CIA. Drug war, drug war. Clinton. He used federal money to fight any state initiatives. Those were the beginning of the medical marijuana initiatives. George Bush, Jr. He knew how to hand out the stimulus funds. At least here was one, September 8th, 2009, study, drugs for depression may shift personality. I mean, why do you get warnings for antidepressants that say, this may make your thoughts of suicide worse? What? You mean you get on Paxil because you're depressed, but you might be worse? Like you're more likely to commit suicide? I mean, I've met maybe 2, 3, 4 people in my life who actually needed a pill form of a drug. I'm not a doctor. I'm saying anecdotally. People that are out of work get depressed. That doesn't mean that you should be taking Paxil or becoming addicted to Paxil or whatever else the antidepressants are. I'm using them generically. I'm not saying specifically Paxil. Any of the others. How can you put up with this? I've heard some people say that I guess illegal drugs are immoral of some kind. These are the same kind of people that can drive while drunk. So you can break that law, but not this other one. So driving while drunk is not immoral, but smoking pot is. What are their parents teaching them? My God. So when you see the message, when you hear the immigration debate, and it's mixed in with drug war violence, remember why you're hearing that. Who's benefiting? The drug companies are benefiting. Defense contractors are benefiting. Everybody except us are benefiting. It makes everything more expensive, and we don't have the money to clean up the Gulf. We need to clean up the Gulf. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.